You are significant. You have seeds of greatness inside of you. You are not on accident. You are on purpose. You are here for a very divine, special purpose. And we are going to talk in this podcast about evidence that you are significant. So glad to have Deborah Bigda here today with me. She is such a great friend of mine. We met through the mastermind with Brooke Hemingway in the Good Life community a couple of years ago now. And I've actually had the pleasure of sharing my story and her sharing her story on the same virtual stage. And so I know you are in for a treat with this episode, and you are significant. If this podcast is serving you, please hit follow and leave a review. It helps other people to see it. And we're going to get it started right away into Deborah's amazing story that she's going to share. Deborah, welcome to You Are Significant.
Oh, thank you, Darlene, for having me. And yes, what a pleasure it is to be here on your podcast and to have gotten to know you over the past several years. That has been one of my biggest gifts. And doing things is getting to meet people. And I've loved your story. You're so inspiring. And so I was really honored when you asked me to join you for your podcast as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. We have so much fun and we have so many inside jokes after
Yes.
all the fun times that we've had in Mastermind together. Deborah was my roommate and she is just the coolest chick. So I'm so excited that we get to do this together today.
Absolutely.
Start from where you want to start and tell us about you and how God has shown you your significance as you have wound through your life journey and all the amazing and difficult things that happen in our life's path.
Yes, thanks, Darlene. Yeah. So, you always hear that saying of it's not happening to me, but like it's happening for me. Or what is it that I can learn from this struggle that I'm in? Because, in all honesty, if we are not struggling through something, then we are not growing and we are remaining stagnant. So, one thing I really love to try to encourage everybody is to view your struggles and your hardships as growth. Because if everything seems status quo, then we're not actually growing. And I realize it can be
Yeah.
very painful during those struggles, but I am known as the Queen of Hope. And the reason I love to have that nickname is I really am passionate about sharing with people to remain hopeful even in the really hard times. My story that I love to kind of tell people about started in 2008. Technically 2007. My husband and I went to a trip on Italy. It was like the first time ever that we'd gone away since our honeymoon. And so that was, I don't know, like over 12, 13 years, something like that, maybe longer. I can't even count. Anyhow, we went to Italy. We crawled up the holy stairs. It was like a religious pilgrimage. We crawled up the holy stairs. I will tell you to be careful what you pray for because you might get an answer, but not the way in which you intended. Okay, so my husband said a prayer. I said a prayer. We go home. It was January of 2008. For those of you that do not remember, that was the beginning of a major recession. And at the end of January, my husband was laid off of his job. Now, at the time, we had 3 children. I homeschooled them, so I was not working. I did immediately try to like start cutting expenses because we had no idea how long this would last. And also at that point, we had no idea we were getting ready to hit a major recession. That was like at the very beginning. February 26th, I remember it like it was just yesterday. My husband and I were sleeping at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. The entire house started to shake. The walls in our bedroom were shaking. We heard a very, very loud sound. We both
Oh
jumped
my.
out of bed and screamed tornado.
Mm.
Never lived through a tornado before. I don't know how I knew that it was one, but just instinctively something told us that it was. And we went running through the house to grab our children. And by the time we made it to the basement to safety, everything had passed. The tornado had literally torn right through our property. Thankfully, our house was intact. There was roof damage, but everything on our property was destroyed. The trees were all upturned, leaving gigantic craters in the earth. And this is when you find out that homeowners insurance does not actually cover any of that type of damage. So all of
Oh,
that damage was our responsibility to pay for. It was well over $10,000 that we had to, repair on our own. And so that was like a major hit to savings when we were unemployed. The following month in March, my husband had his skin cancer came back again, and that required surgery. And at this point, we did not have health insurance. And so I remember sitting at the kitchen table in March, shortly after that diagnosis. And my husband and I were just looking at each other and we were just like, Lord, like, we know you say you'll never give us more than we can handle, but we're telling you, like, we really feel like this is all we can handle. And please just, it just felt like he was trying to send us a message. And at the time, we were in the thick of it. And so we were just like, are you trying to just like take us out? Because if so, just please just do it once and for all. Like, just take us out right now because this is more than we can handle. And this actually went on for 2 years. It was 2 years of my husband looking for a job. It was 2 years of my husband applying for positions, getting very, very high recommendations from many, many people, having people tell him, we are absolutely calling you tomorrow with a job offer. And tomorrow would come and they would call him and they're like, I don't know how to explain this, but the job's been, suspended. The job's been frozen. And this was happening over and over and over again.
mm,
And it was really a struggle for him. And I remember he came to me one day in September and he was like, he was physically looking at his body and he was like, what is wrong with me? Like, he's like, why is nobody offering me? Like, is there something wrong with me? And he goes, I have turned everything over to God because by this point, we've always gone to church faithfully every week for mass, but we had always wanted to do like certain retreats and we were always too busy. So during this time period, we were not that busy. And so we started going to some of these retreats because we were like, okay, time is no longer an excuse for us. We had a lot of free time. Work was not too busy. Clearly, he didn't have work. And so he was like, I've turned everything over to God. And I was like, everything but one thing. And he just looked at me. And you see, we practiced natural family planning. So I charted my cycle. I knew exactly when I was fertile and when I was not fertile. And we had 3 children. And when you're unemployed, it doesn't seem like a logical time to get pregnant. And so he very much was always in control over, what making sure that we would not have a, get pregnant. And so I just looked at him and I said, we turned everything over but our fertility. I'm like, maybe we just need to lay that at God's feet and stop being in control. And he looked at me because, mind you, he's also like only one of 2 kids. He comes from a very small family. So when we first got married, like 2 kids seemed like plenty, you know, and we already had 3. So 4 just seemed like, whoa. And I kind of noticed he stopped asking if it was a safe time. And about, I don't know, 2 or maybe 3 months later, he came to me one day and it was, after we had, gotten some sexy time on in the bedroom. And he's like, so that probably wasn't a safe time, was it? Like you could almost tell like he was kind of like proud of like not asking. I was like, oh, that was safe, but last week, probably not so much. Because I was still charting. It was just like, force of habit. Um, and lo and behold, we got pregnant. And we told people, um, and it was shocking to me. It was really hurtful. We had some people, including family members, be like, wow, like you do know how to have prevented that, right? Like that must have been a mistake. And it was hurtful. Looking back now, I realized they were just scared for us. They
mhm,
weren't judging us. They were just scared of how are you going to do this? You don't have a job, you don't have income, you don't have health insurance. And so they were just scared for us.
They didn't want to see you suffer.
No, they did
Yeah.
not want to see us suffer. And so I tell people now, like, if somebody says something to you and it feels hurtful, take a breath and try. It's really hard to see it from their perspective, but it may not really be that they're judging you, but they're fearful. And sometimes some people, when they're afraid of something, they don't know how to express that in a loving or reasonable manner.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, when they're afraid, just start to scream and yell and get like so angry. And you're like standing there and you're like, what you're saying just doesn't even make sense. And then when you start to listen, you can hear like there's this weird underlying fear that they have. Um, but long story short, we ended up having our daughter. I had three boys. So surprise, come the next July. This was almost so when we got pregnant, my husband was, a little shocked, but he was also excited. But in his mind, he was 100% certain that he was going to have a job by the time she was born. It was 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
You're pregnant for 9 months. Surely in 9 months, I'm going to have a job. It's already been 11 months by the time we found out we were pregnant. And another 9 months, surely I'll have a job by then, right? Well, 9 months came and went, and he did not have a job. And I remember being at the hospital, and he just slipped into the deepest, darkest depression ever. He felt like he was a failure as a provider, a failure as a father. He still had zero hope that any job was coming because still it was this weird thing of job after job. We're going to call you tomorrow with an offer, and tomorrow would come. Every single job was like, I'm sorry, like it's been frozen. And they were like literally like clueless, in less than 12 hours, it was, you're gonna get an offer to it's been frozen. And
What kind of work did he do?
he marketing and advertising,
Mm-hmm.
sports marketing, and he had positions where like the CMO of the previous company was calling and giving referrals
Mm-hmm.
to so like he had very high level referrals being given. And it's always they say it's not what you know, but it's who you know. So he knew a lot of people, and a lot of people were making connections, and things just kept shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I remember I literally had to, I probably would have had to drive myself home from the hospital, except for the fact that like they have this law that you can't. So my husband drove me home. He was, I distinctly remember he was like on a call, like an interview call. He got home and he pretty much just put himself to bed. And for about the next 6 weeks, that's pretty much where he resided. Um, I don't hold any hard feelings for that because he was just in a really dark space. That was July. In September of 2009, so it's been whatever, like almost 20 months at this point. He had a job interview and a potential opportunity up in New Jersey. And so we flew to Jersey to go for like this, in-person interview, kind of meet the people, and because it would clearly require a move. And we were coming home, and I called his mother on our way home from the airport, and she seemed so distant, you know? And I remember hanging up the phone and I looked at my husband, I'm like, you're something's wrong with your mom. Like, I don't know what it is, but like she's so vague. I was asking her questions and she's just so vague. And I go, there's just something off. And the next morning I called her again and they were at the hospital. They had been at the hospital the night before when I called her. And moments before I called her, it was her and her husband. Moments before I called her, the doctor had come in. They had gone in because they were thinking that my father-in-law was having a heart attack. He was having like a lot of weird heart symptoms. And the doctor had just come in moments before I called and said, hey, good news, bad news. Good news, your heart's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Bad news, you have lung cancer. The oncologist will be in tomorrow to talk to you. And so
Wow.
that was the message and the news that they had moments before I called. They had no idea what stage, what was it going to require. So you could understand how you're just completely out of sorts. They didn't want to say anything to us yet because they didn't even feel like they knew what to say. It turned out to be stage 4 lung cancer.
Mm.
That was September of 2009. Sorry, it literally chokes me up every time I think of this. And my father-in-law passed away within 4 months.
Mm.
Um, the first month he was, kind of okay. The second month, he could go out, but he was very physically challenged. Like he was using a walker, a cane. The third month, he was pretty much stuck into a recliner at home. And the fourth month, he was pretty much comatose in a hospital bed at home. And of that little baby, that was the supposed mistake, was the biggest gift to my father-in-law, because the other grandchildren, they loved grandpa. But when we would go over to grandpa's house to go, visit, grandpa couldn't do the things that he used to be able to do. Grandpa was getting really thin, and that just sickly, ugly gray color of the skin that just does not look normal or healthy. He was losing hair. And so the kids would play around him, but they couldn't play with him. But my little baby, she sat in his lap and she would make googly eyes at him and she would smile at him and he would just laugh. And when the cancer got into his bones and it hurt too much for her to sit on his lap, I would hold her on the arm of the recliner and he'd just kind of stroke her leg and he would just look at her and he would just smile. And so I tell people, I'm like, literally, she was God's gift. God knew the previous year what my father-in-law was going to be enduring. And he knew that she would bring such joy to him. And January came around of I guess 2010. And I remember going to his house one day. I had Honor with me. She was only whatever, maybe like 5 months at the time. Um, and he was completely comatose. He would like open his he was open his mouth as I was feeding his ice chips. But other than that, like he never opened his eyes. You didn't even know, like, does he even know that I'm here? Can he hear anything I'm saying? And Anna was with me and she made like a googly sound and he kind of startled and his eyes opened. And I was like, Grandpa, look who came to visit you. It's Honor. And he got this huge smile across his face. And then he just drifted away again. And that was like it. And I called my husband and I was like, I was begging him. I was like, you have to go say goodbye to your father. You have to say goodbye. Like everybody else had told him it was okay to go, and everybody else had said like the final goodbyes and like we'll be okay. But my husband, he couldn't let go of him. He wasn't ready to say goodbye. And I was like, you have to go say goodbye. He needs to hear it. And so he went that night and he was there for over 2 hours. And he came home and he just was bawling like a baby. And the next morning I went to my mother-in-law's house and as I walked in, she was like, he's taking his last breath. He's taking his last breath. I really can tell. And so he did. He took his last breath and he passed away right there. With me. I had tried to call my husband to get him to come over, but he could not get there fast enough. But parts of the story that I like have left out. I homeschooled all my kids, I said, and so I had three at the time. After my daughter was born, my husband sank into the deep depression. I had severe anxiety, like I have never experienced in my entire life. I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, bawling with my heart racing because I didn't know what I was going to make for lunch 3 days from now. And it wasn't even like I don't know what I'm going to make for lunch because like we don't have money to buy food. It was like just this weird anxiety. And I would tell people like the thought of public school never was something I was willing to do. I loved being with my kids. I loved homeschooling them. I loved talking to them about, God. I loved everything about it. But when I thought of homeschooling, I could not breathe. I felt like an elephant was sitting on me. It was something I cannot really describe. And when I thought of public school, what I tell people is I could breathe. I didn't love the idea or like the idea, but I could breathe through the idea. And so in in August, before we knew about my father-in-law being sick, we enrolled my two oldest kids in public school, and we put my third child in a preschool, a 3-year-old preschool program. So all I had at home was my daughter. Had we not done that, when my father-in-law got sick, we would have repeated the school year because I was at my in-laws' house every single day for the 4 months. So sometimes not sometimes, God always knows what he's doing. God always knows.
Sometimes we can recognize God no.
Right. I could not see that when I was in the midst of the anxiety, when I was in the midst of, oh my gosh, like I cannot breathe. I could not understand why this was happening in my mind to me. It was happening for me so that it would lead me into a path that would allow me to be able to be there for my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, at a time where I wanted to be able to be there for them. And
Yes, and sometimes as strong women, it takes an elephant sitting on our chest to make
it
us decide to change paths.
it sure does.
Be, defensive and argue and avoid and
Yes.
control and all of these things and be like, no, I got this. I can do it all.
Ex-
And out of faith, God's going to help me to do it all and I can do it. I know I can do it. But sometimes God knows exactly what we need, and it could be not being able to breathe unless you go down a different path, and that anxiety was actually a blessing for you.
yes, it
And
was.
I think about your husband too, that 6 weeks, deep depression. I'm imagining him laying in the bed in the dark. And that's a hard time period because you have a new baby. You're going through all the hormone changes, plus you have 3 other children. And I can remember even when I went from 2 to 3 children, because I have 4 children also. But I can remember when I went from having 2 to 3, just how much more overwhelmed I
Yes.
felt as a new mother, and that I I grieve that no grandparents live close by.
Right.
So for your husband to be in the bed, plus not a job, plus the financial worries that would create, um, what a character building time. And the fact that you couldn't see into the future and know ahead of time that it was it was going to prepare you for something even harder, and that's
Yeah.
losing a parent.
Well, and I will tell you, Darlene, so, I mentioned that we were going to a job interview, like a final job interview, before we found out about the diagnosis for my father-in-law. And ultimately, the company did offer my husband a position. Now, this came like literally as we found out about my father-in-law's diagnosis, and my husband was like, I can't move. Like, what are we
Mhm.
going to do? And God always has a plan. And literally out of clear blue, another company called him for a position. He had interviewed for a position months and months ago and was told no. And so they had another position come up, and they called him and said, hey, we have another position. We'd love for you to come in. He went in, and so there we are, like, we're trying to wait for this job. Like, okay, are you going to get a job like out of this? Are you going to get an offer out of this? While we're also holding this company with a job offer up in Jersey, you know? And so he did decide to accept the job in Jersey and was kind of like, okay, I'll come up in whatever, like 3 weeks. And in that 3 week time period, we're just like, oh my God, like, Lord, please, like, if this is meant to be, if we're meant to stay here, like, make this other job like come through. And the job in Georgia ultimately offered him a position for far less money, a far less title. The job in Jersey was going to be a huge promotion, a lot of money, lots of bonuses. And ultimately, a company in Georgia did offer him a position. And so it came as we were at the ball field, and I was like, okay, we're just going to go to adoration and we're going to just go pray over this decision. And my husband's like, okay, great. I'm the numbers girl. Okay. So I know all the stuff. He's like, print out all our budget stuff, all our financials, and let's bring it to adoration with us so we can pray over this. And so as we're driving to adoration, I asked Chris, I said, tell me what you love about each job and tell me what what you don't think you'd like about each job. Just tell me about each job. And so he's just talking about each job. And literally, I felt this warm breeze blow through my body. And I heard God say to me, I have taken care of you for 2 years. How dare you think I won't take care of you now? You need
Mm,
to stay in Georgia. And I'm still listening to Chris, and we get to the chapel and we walk in and he's like, "Okay, show me the papers." Well, Darlene, on paper, we needed to move. I mean, we
mm,
had depleted our life savings. We had lived off of our life savings for 2 years. There wasn't a single penny left in our life savings.
mm,
There were many times where, like, we weren't really sure how we were gonna pay the next bill, but God always provided a way. But there was nothing left that we had. And not only did we then need to, like, need money, but, like, it was a 2 years of, like, having not saved. So not only did we
mm.
lose our savings, but we also weren't saving for 2 years. So everything on paper said move. And I just looked at my husband, I said, "God told me we need to stay. God just said we need to stay." And again, remember, this is like a week or 2 after the diagnosis, having no idea what's coming down the pike, that, like, "Oh, maybe he'll just like, maybe your dad will actually be okay." And as it turned out, he wasn't. And looking back, so we ultimately accepted the job here in Georgia, and looking back, we realized, Darlene, every single job interview that he went on, every single job interview that then said, "We're calling you tomorrow with an offer." And every single job that called and said, "Sorry," like it got frozen. Every single one of them was out of town. And
Mm.
so what we didn't realize is during that 2-year time period, my husband was fishing with his father, talking about the different jobs he was interviewing for. His father was helping to coach baseball with our kids. My husband was going over to his parents' house, just having lunch, just, chewing the fat, just talking about the job, talking about life, just whatever. He was spending 2 years with his father, just having time with him.
Mm.
And I honestly feel like had any one of those jobs come up, he would have taken it. We would have moved because he would have felt this sense of obligation to provide for the family, and we would
Of
have
course.
and he would have lost that time. And so God gave him a gift of time with his father because he was not ready to say goodbye to his father, even with all of that. Had he not had that time, even if he'd been working 40 hours a week here in Georgia, but he had, like, limited time with his father, I think it would have crushed him even more. And so I just tell people, like, sometimes we can't see what's happening,
Mhm.
but it is such a gift. And so to survive something like that, I just say, 1, to just move your body all the time. Movement is so key. 2, really do try to have hope. Like, find the silver lining in the stuff. Even in the like, when we went out and everything was destroyed on our property, our whole fence was gone except for the gate, and the gate would lock, and so we had dogs, and we would joke, "Hey, lock the gate so the dogs don't get out of the backyard." There was no fence to keep them in the backyard, but, like, have that sense of humor. I mean, we joked about that every day, like, the joke never got old, even though probably it got old.
I love that.
Having that sense of humor, you know, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, there were times where we did actually go to the food bank for food. That was a very humbling experience. But I was like, okay, you know what? If we go to the food bank for food, the little money that I have can be put towards something else.
That's right. Exactly. And so, sometimes we go through things that we think, I can't live through this. I
Right.
just can't. I can't do it. I remember when I found out Don was going to deploy to Iraq, and I just thought, I can't make it through that.
Yeah.
But in the moment, God provided the strength. He didn't provide it ahead of time.
Right.
And I don't know that I even have that strength for that now. He provided it in the moment when I needed it.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So, thank you so much for sharing about this portion of your life with us and how God showed you your significance and strengthened you to get through those things and to see that He was there through it all.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. And I hope that somebody out there that might be struggling right now or knows of somebody that's struggling, can share your episode with people because we all need to have that glimmer of hope to know that we will survive it. It may feel completely unbearable. You may not be able to even see how in the world things could work out for you or that things could get better. And, the time span may be short, it may be long, but there is always hope. There is always hope in there.
Absolutely, 100%. Another job. What job did he end up getting? We have to know.
So he took the job that was in Georgia. And the funny thing is God has blessed him, even though like the salary was like it was way less than what his previous job had been, you know, but we have been blessed tenfold since that, I think just for remaining faithful. And we have more than been able to replenish our savings. And, so it has truly been a blessing. And it's a story that I love to just kind of tell to my kids too, to like remind them to be faithful. Like during a struggle and a difficult time, we want our children to know how to deal with hardship. We don't always want to make it look like roses for them because they are going to see hardship at some point in their life. And if all they've ever seen is like roses and you never let them know, hey, look, there's times where mom and dad are scared too. There's times where mom and dad aren't really sure, like, how things are going to work out. Then what is that doing to help raise your child for when they have a hardship? And then they're just like, oh my gosh, like my parents never had any issues. Like everything was peaches and cream. And, you know, so,
Exactly.
and
Mhm.
I like my kids to know that sometimes unexpected things happen for really great reasons. Like, I mean, I cannot imagine life without our daughter. I can't even fathom what our life would be without our daughter. Yeah.
I love her name, Honor. So,
Yes.
did you name her because of you honored God and that calling to just like put it at His feet? You somebody would say cast it to the wind, but no, you laid it at His feet. The fertility,
Yeah.
and is that where her name came from? Or
Actually, believe it or not, Darlene, before my husband and I ever got married, he told me, he goes, I love the name Honor. If we ever have a girl, that's what I want to name her. And
oh,
so through
oh
all of
my goodness,
I know. Through all of our pregnancies, it was always super easy. If it's a girl, the name is Honor. If it's a boy, like we had to come up with a name. And so there were times where I loved the boy's name Connor. I was like, oh, we can't name a boy Connor because I don't ever want to end up with a Connor and an Honor. And so honestly, when we got pregnant
great
with her,
twin names,
I
but
know that would be but when we got pregnant with her, we never find out the gender ever. We just always let it be a surprise. And when we were getting ready to deliver her, um, the nurse was like, I'm just letting you know, like, it's not a 50-50 shot after three boys. She's like, you're probably having a boy. I'm like, that's fine. I can have a basketball team. And the funny thing is he'll cringe when he hears tell me the story. But when she came out for that split, like 100th of a second, he was like, "Oh my god, there's something wrong with this baby." Because all he'd ever seen come out was boys. And so like it didn't even dawn on him what was quote unquote wrong or different was that we were having a girl, you know? And then they're like, it's a girl. And he's like, oh, like that's what it is. But when the
you didn't
baby
know
comes
what girl
out, he's like,
anatomy looked like.
what's wrong with the baby?
That is
So
so funny.
yeah. But
I had three, and then we had a boy last. So
yeah, yeah.
it's
But I
the
do
same
think,
way with my husband. Know why?
yeah.
No, we found out ahead with window before
Did you?
we knew we were having a boy for the fourth one. We never found out ahead for any of the girls,
Okay.
but we did because it was over 9 years between the youngest girl and this baby that we were having. So we were like, we had already gotten rid of everything, and
Right.
so we wanted to buy gender specific when we were buying stuff, and people were gifting us things. So we did
Yeah.
find out. For it felt like cheating, but
Well, everybody has their some people love to know. I just always love the surprise. But honestly, thinking back on it, God probably uh, gifted my husband a girl. I think he
Mhm.
gifted because I mean he loves his boys. Like he would never want it any other way, right? God always knows exactly what's perfect. Um,
Yes.
but boy, did she have daddy wrapped around her finger.
There's nothing like a daddy and his
Yeah.
girl. Thank you so much for hopping on today and sharing. I just absolutely adore you, Deborah. And thank you for sharing this part of your story. I would love for you to hop on again and
Yes.
share it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Darlene. You have an amazing day, and I hope that this has served someone in your audience.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to You Are Significant. Please leave us a review. Please leave comments, give us a like, and share this out. We appreciate you here on You Are Significant, and I cannot wait till next time to spend time with you.